So before having our last dialogue, I would like to say thank you to our organizers. Sheila and Francesca, to the chefs who are not here, but did a very good job. I feel stupid. I feel like Trump applauding, you know. So, and to all the volunteers and scholarships who have helped us, made that possible. Thank you. Also to all of you who have contributed financially to make that possible too. Also to the musicians, poets, clowns, jesters, comedians, and whatever, and to the IT crew and camera crew. Now, any questions left? Let's see what's the words.
Francis, what is the role of the teacher?
This.
In your eyes. Okay. How did you feel Jean Klein helped you on your path?
He was a free spirit. I wasn't. I became one. Freedom is the most important aspect. That's why it's called liberation. Sweetness is nice. It's important in the beginning to heal the wounds of separation. So the love, the sweetness. But then the freedom, you know, the humor, the life, the celebration, that comes a little later.
Thank you.
Don't stop it. We are not saving energy and the batteries for the global warming. Don't worry too much.
A couple of retreats ago, I wasn't here, but I heard you speak about it. There was a yoga you did where you project yourself in another object. Could you talk more about that?
It's a to project the sense of me onto objects surrounding us. It's a technique. You project, so you, because we usually see the world that surrounds us as not me. So one way to try to counter and reprogram this separativeness, if you will, or separation, is by using techniques such as this one. Not important. One tool among others in the toolbox. Whichever tool works for you. The screwdriver that works to unscrew the screw of ignorance, I mean, there might be several screwdrivers that work at the same time, but I gave you more screwdrivers than you need to unscrew the... So don't feel that you have to master all the screwdrivers.
Yeah, but sometimes it's nice to keep it fresh.
Yeah.
And another question I was just wondering.
There are old-fashioned screwdriver you have to turn manually, and then there's a modern one.
Does it make sense to teach these things, yoga, meditation, to young kids? You know, about the body work.
Sounds to me too much like Sunday school. With kids, I would just try to be myself so that they can be themselves. You see, and follow their interest, not try to make them follow my interest, but for us to follow their interest, to encourage them to be independent, to be free spirit, to be Americans, you know. That's what I love about Americans, is independence. It's so much in line with truth. I mean, this pioneer spirit, this so much, is so beautiful, and we are losing it, but that's a different story.
No, I was just wondering, because we're spending so much effort to unlearn things that we have learned. So I was just wondering whether it made sense for the young ones to...
Yeah, but what we have learned, most of it, we have not learned it in the words. We have learned it through osmosis. Through, there is good Santa and bad Santa, and there is good satsang and bad satsang. Bad satsang is to hang out with ignorant people. So we have, and what you learn through satsang is so only the intellectual aspect of it is just the emerging part of the iceberg. All the rest is, through body language, through mirroring neurons, etc. So if you try to teach the children, you can only address the emerging part of the iceberg, whereas if you transform yourself, then this transformation will address the totality of their being. That's why before we change others, we have to change ourselves, and it is to the extent that we live the truth that we will share it. It is not to the extent that we tell the truth. It is to the extent that we live the truth, even without telling it, we'll still share 90% of it. Whereas, if we tell it without experiencing it, we share 0% of it. Because at first, the body language won't be there, and whatever we will tell, the body language will deny it. And so it won't come across. If someone tells you, je t'aime, I love you, doesn't touch us, much.
And my last question on borderlessness. For me, borderlessness seems to be more pervasiveness. It pervades. What is your experience of borderlessness?
It's both, yes, it's definitely pervasiveness. As I describe it, what we do in the yoga, we change the way we have been programmed the way we have been programmed to perceive the body and the world. We change this way to perceive the body and the world as being one single body, instead of two separate things. So then whatever works with that, I can give many definitions, many explanations, but whatever goes in this direction is a good screwdriver.
And also, it can be that one doesn't perceive the world as their object, as their body, versus it just appears in them.
But then their body appears in them too.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you.
I have a question about chaos and order. You were talking yesterday about, you said there's nothing that's random, and I've been noticing increasingly in my intuition, it's there are appearances that seem like they have an ordering principle, and then I'm just open to the idea that the appearances that I don't see the ordering principle, that there probably is one. And I was wondering if your confidence in when you say that nothing is random, if that's has been an intuition that's grown over the years for you.
To answer that rationally is this. If you have several events in your life that convince you that at least in those cases there was no randomness, then there is no randomness at all. Are you following this reasoning? Because either everything is random or nothing is.
Gotcha. Yeah.
It would be an insult to intelligence to believe that some things are random and others aren't. Right? So then that's why God has organized for each of us a few events in life that shows obviously that there is no randomness, such as serendipity events, things like that. And then God leaves it up to us to connect the dots. So you have a few dots that are not random, and then it means anything in between those dots is not random either.
Thank you.
You know, that's one. It's like in physics, you know, randomness kind of expresses our lack of knowledge of a more microscopic level.
Follow-up question. So the randomness or chaos, whatever the meaning is being derived from the phenomena, that is just purely from the perspective of the separate self, isn't it? Because if there is no separate self, there is no such thing even as randomness or chaos. I mean, yeah. It just happens.
But the question is, the moment it is not full chaos, there is order.
Okay.
Yes. Right?
Yeah.
There is order. On the other hand, if it were absolute order, we would have a static universe. It would be 0 degree K, you know. Absolute order is absolute zero temperature. So if we had absolute order, there would be total, the universe as a whole would be like a corpse. The cosmos would be a corpse, so there would be no life. So life requires order and seeming chaos, but the fact that there is some amount of order implies that the reality that creates orders and chaos and this dynamism is absolute order. It cannot be absolute chaos.
Right. Okay.
You know, again, the plus cannot come out of the minus. Absolute order on a different level can play on a lower level can give on a lower level the impression of some element of chaos. You know, in physics, modern physics, there is such a thing as a spontaneous breaking of symmetry. And what it means that a symmetry on a higher level of energy, when the energy diminishes, then this symmetry breaks up. To give you an illustration of that is, how do you call these tools, these toys that the kids play with? Okay, a top. You make a top rotate, and then as it rotates, it is perfectly symmetrical from all sides, as long as it has this kinetic energy that keeps it rotating. Then, after a while, the kinetic energy wears off, we go on a lower level of energy, and what happens at some point? It falls on the side. So then, the beautiful circular symmetry that it had while rotating gets broken. You see, this phenomenon is ever present at the microscopic level. For instance, the Higgs boson you have heard about is So what I am trying to illustrate here using brainy examples is the fact that there is absolute order at a higher level, and then when you go down to a lower level, then the symmetry gets broken, some apparent disorders appears. It's the same thing in the universe. The universe appears to be almost random, you know, the clusters of the repartition of mass and energy throughout the universe seems to be almost random, you know, like grains of sand on the beach. But at the time of the Big Bang, it was more orderly, more simple. Yeah, anyway, let's not go
just
down.
one question, sorry. Just one more validation. So I am the one consciousness, and so is, of course, the everyone here an expression of consciousness, including everything, the plants.
No, we are not an expression of consciousness. We are consciousness. The bodies around us and the tables are expression of consciousness.
Right, yes. And the thoughts and the sensations that I see as my body and mind are personal only to me, the separate self, as in this body and mind. But
there is no privacy, in fact. It's like the internet.
Well, so the reason I'm saying is because I cannot experience somebody else's thoughts or their bodily sensations as me. But they are...
No. It's the rule is one mind at a time.
I don't follow.
The fact that you don't have, that it seems to you that you don't have a simultaneous knowledge of other minds, is just a belief.
Right, so
yeah.
Sorry.
It's just a belief. It's not evidence. For instance, you have no doubt that you were the witness of your breakfast this morning, but right? And that it was the same you who is hearing my words now who was the witness of this breakfast. However, this phenomenal element, whatever you drank for breakfast, whatever you ate, is not present right now, right? But so therefore, the fact that what you were experiencing earlier on is not present doesn't mean that it was not you who was experiencing it.
Right.
Are you following me?
Yeah.
The fact that a phenomenon is not present doesn't imply that you are not the witness of this phenomenon.
That's a thinker. Just speaking of present experience, for example, if let's say I ate something bitter, that's not something that anybody else can experience that.
But how do you know there is anybody else?
Well, you are there, aren't you? I mean, aren't you?
But how do you know that that which you see is that which experiences? In your case, in your own case, can you see that which experiences? No. So why do you assume that you can see here that which experiences?
Wow. Thank you.
I
just wanted to go back to the order and chaos. So I think the basic sciences are just a means of being able to to get more visibility into the laws of nature.
Yeah.
So, like you mentioned, the randomness, could it be that actually there is order to the randomness, except we don't know?
Absolutely, that's what I said. When what we take to be randomness at a certain level is simply reflects our ignorance of what goes on at more, for instance, mechanical statistics, right? The gas, the laws of perfect gases, right? The Marriott law reflects simply our lack of detailed knowledge of all the trajectories of the molecules and their shock against the walls of the container. So we have thermodynamic quantities such as temperature and pressure that express, in fact, at the same time our ignorance of the detail, but at the same time some knowledge of the global behavior of this population. So it's a little bit different in quantum mechanics because the statistics there are different. We don't talk in terms of probabilities, but in terms of amplitudes. So it's a little bit different, but nevertheless there are similarities.
Yeah, because even the probabilities might be subject to some laws that
Right.
we are not privy to as yet.
Right. Also in the case of quantum, it seems that if we want to keep the locality and to keep the limit of the speed of light for causation, then we won't have any local hidden parameters. In other words, there is not going to be any local determinism. Then this determinism has to be global. So.
So then it just, for me, there's this utter humility that there's really nothing much I can control.
That's
because
true.
Thank you.
Yesterday you were speaking of our thoughts becoming more impersonal.
What?
Thoughts becoming more impersonal. But at the same time, aren't they, if they're cosmic events, aren't they all impersonal?
Yes, but there are two kinds. There are thoughts that are directly impersonal and that are direct expression of consciousness. And there are thoughts that come via ignorance. So that which is impersonal is the choice made by consciousness to play the game of ignorance through a specific body-mind. But once this game of ignorance is being played, all the thoughts and actions that are part of this game playing, they are the ones I call personal or ignorant. In other words, first, I make the choice as consciousness to believe to be separate. Mm-hmm. That's the first step. And that this choice is impersonal. Definitely, because it's a choice by consciousness. But once this choice is made and conveniently forgotten, mm-hmm. then the thoughts, many thoughts will originate that take for granted, if you will, implicitly that I am a separate consciousness, that I am a separate person. So these thoughts are the ones I call personal or ignorant. But ultimately, you're right. Ultimately, everything is impersonal, yes. But on the level of, it's always the same thing. On the level of the absolute, there is no difference. So everything is impersonal. But there is a relative level on which there is a difference. In other words, there is a relative level on which the action of Hitler or Stalin or Pol Pot or Fidel Castro and the actions of Ramana Maharshi or Krishna Menon or Jesus are different.
Okay, and then another, I think I ask this at every retreat, it's like tips for after, because it seems like we're here, and during the time we're here, we're facing a certain direction, and when we go out into the world, there's not a lot of encouragement to face in that direction. And so you have to kind of have your own motor.
Yeah.
And mine seems to run down a little. You know what I
But
it's always good to come back. It's like,
yes, but what is, yeah.
Yeah.
And because when we come back here, what we say is not important. It seems important but what we say is just a pretense to hang out together.
okay, I believe it.
And the yoga also, it's not that important ultimately, it's just a pretense to hang out together. You see, so in other words, the truth communicates itself not with the words and with the yoga, but in a sense between the words and between the whatever it is that we allegedly do here. And the beauty is, if I have to make a big confession, is that I don't know what I am teaching.
It's great. It's just great.
You see? But that's the teaching.
Yeah.
The teaching is that I don't know what I am teaching.
Yeah.
You see? But nevertheless, we experience it, and we see the difference, and it is in the air, we don't know. And that's the beauty of it. But it is experiential. We cannot deny it. It's very different from a political meeting, a religious meeting, whatever meeting we have had the opportunity to experience in our life. It's very different. I mean, yesterday I was looking at you, and they were only smiles. I should have taken a picture, because everybody was a big smile, It was so beautiful, And when I am in my quarters there, and I hear laughters, and it's like, like you are in the forest and you hear the birds, and you feel good about it. It was the same. I feel good about hearing all these birds. And I saw in French empty bottles. We call them corpses. I saw a lot of corpses in the kitchen. He's a culprit here.
So in between being here, so when I'm not here,
but
I can't be here every day. It doesn't.
Well, we are always here. When we separate, we don't separate. So we have to know that. We are always together. We separate in name only.
Thank you.
We are sinos.
It seems like ignorance is it's the cause of all of our, as a world, what we do as humans. Do you feel that that's the cause of all of the suffering and all the mistakes that we make?
But you see, in this question there is the implicit notion that suffering is bad. Whereas in fact, psychological suffering is a good thing. It is on the path, there is a good cop and a bad cop. The good cop is the guru, the bad cop is suffering. But they both keep us on the straight path. They both take us to the truth. You see? So, in fact, the suffering is not the enemy of the guru. They are cooperating. The suffering is the love for the truth that pulls us towards the truth. It's the energy of the truth that is taking us back home. So when we tend to go in the opposite direction, we feel the tension that takes us back home and we experience it as suffering. When we stop resisting and we allow the bungee cord to take us back home, then the suffering vanishes because it was mostly in our resistance. Yes. So, and the idea, of course, I know it's what I said that I don't know what I'm teaching, so I guess you don't know either. No. So it's kind of disappointing because usually you go to college and you complete I don't know a course in African American lesbian studies at UC Berkeley, and then after you have done the 101, and if you persist, you can do 201. And then you leave UC Berkeley thinking that you have learned something, right? Whereas here you don't learn, you unlearn.
I'm so glad about that.
Scott, I was hoping you could talk about sounds. Specifically, the difference between sound perceptions experienced during the nighttime dream and the waking state dream. Could you speak to the differences from the subjective experience of hearing the sounds during the two states? And if possible, from a scientific perspective, does a tree falling in the woods make a sound, whether I am there to experience it or not? Well, regarding the last question, from a scientific perspective, even if you are not there, you can put a microphone that is going to record the oscillation in pressure of the sound waves. And therefore, from a scientific vantage point, you can see there were what is called sound waves. But nobody heard them, but they were sound waves. From a scientific vantage point, perhaps there were no sound waves. It's not ultimate proof, because after all, the idealist perspective is perhaps true, that the universe exists only as mind projection. As you have learned from previous dialogues, it is not a certainty either that such is the case. There might be other models that are equally valid. Now, the difference between sound perceptions experienced during the night dream and the waking state dream, well, the physical ones are different and the difference is that the physical one can be recorded with a microphone and a tape recorder, and the subtle ones cannot. So that's the difference. Now, the subtle ones are not perceived only during the dream state. They are also perceived during the waking state. I mean, Beethoven was deaf, so he couldn't, and he composed the most beautiful quartets when he was deaf. And believe me, he was hearing this music, and therefore he was composing it during the waking state. So I hope these explanations, which are not really germane to the centrality of our conversation here, give you the beginning of an answer to your questions. Nicole, she doesn't have the correct password. Is there a different password for today other than understanding? All in lowercase. I tap understanding and it says inferata. So no capital. Okay, it goes there. I need to take a short break. Too much tea this morning. And with my tactile body, So one more evidence that the guru is human, after all. So, Michael. One reality is streaming in a temporary body-mind which is acting as an agency of consciousness itself when a feeling, or for example, sadness comes online. Can this be either the collective sadness in the realm of this culture or some personal residue of past conditioning? What are the skillful means to receive these energies? Yes, a glimpse of truth reveals the ultimate joy that we are. And then we can witness how the residual sadness in us melts away like snow in the sun. This sun never sets. So then, when we are in contact of others, their sadness through a form of empathy visits us, but the sun is still there and it melts away in the same way as it has melted away in the past. Once our own stuff has melted away, we are not afraid of it. We are not defensive against it. We don't oppose it, because we know that it is not real. We know it doesn't affect us. It cannot affect us. In other words, when we feel negativity in us, in the presence of others, that is projected onto us, if you will, or that you catch the flu from others through empathy. If we have learned experientially how to process our own negativity, this negativity is not a problem. And the question whether it is collective or personal doesn't really arise any longer, because everything is collective. Because everything is universal. So the question, is it collective or personal, becomes meaningless. It's all universal. It has always been. There is nothing personal in the universe. Jerome I have listened to you way too long to take a materialistic view. But to understand thoughts are always a cosmic event, do you mean that the material aspect of the brain responsible for memories is part of the universe? And not a result of ignorance necessarily? Definitely, whatever material aspect of the brain responsible for memories is part of the universe. That's obvious. And not a result of ignorance. But a result of ignorance can be part of the universe. So I don't see the incompatibility between these two possibilities. First, that the conditioning of the brain and of the body is part of the universe on the one hand, but on the other hand, that this conditioning is the product of ignorance, or is, in a sense, the way ignorance seems to perpetuate itself in the case of this specific body-mind entity. There is no, these two possibilities are not necessarily mutually exclusive or excluding each other. Klaus. After asking about perception and experience, it's a previous reference to a previous question, I realized that I did this because I sometimes wonder whether it is possible to have a string or period of more unpleasant experiences, thoughts and bodily experiences, and still experience peace in between. This seems to be sometimes the case for me, but I am not sure whether I deceive myself if I think this. Well, it's definitely possible. Okay, Tom, here is a deep esoteric question. What do you have against onions and garlic? Well, yes, God has made two mistakes. One is to create mosquitoes, and the other one is to create plants that have bulbs, like tulips onion, garlic, leeks. Because tulips have bulbs. Everything with the bulbs. You know, also in Moscow, this bulb thing, type of architecture. that gives me rashes all over the body. Yes, we are through with these important questions here.
Sorry, I have a question. Yeah. I remember before, when many years back, and I'm this separated self, so I like to sometimes, some little trouble, some ignorance, pain, kind of you self-inflated pain, sometimes give me pleasure, made me feel like I'm great, That's old me.
Well, ignorance is, in essence, S&M.
Yeah.
That's it's just self-inflicted pain.
Right.
So basically,
right.
And that's what people don't understand when you tell them you are psychological suffering only because you enjoy it. So then they get mad at you, which gives them an opportunity to enjoy it even more, getting mad.
Right.
You see, so
My experience is like I enjoy a little trouble, little pain until I would hit a really so painful, and I'm passed out and I wake up, and that's my experience. And now is problem is because I'm a beginner, so I look at people, I see my old me everywhere. And so I was like, I want to help, but at the same time I feel like, that they're on their path to be awakened, So my question will be, you want to be passionate and compassion and help. At the same time, with second, they need this medication to wake them up, need this experience.
Absolutely.
So
my teacher used to say, you may help a little bit, alleviate the pain, but you don't want to take it completely because the pain is there for a good reason.
Yeah, that's the question is, I don't know which position, how close I should do
It's
things.
like when you have a child, you don't want to raise a child just in a house in a place which is full of cotton everywhere,
Right. Right, no.
full of cotton, so
Right.
that they don't bump against anything, so they are completely preserved. You don't want to do that.
Only things is sometimes I feel like kind of lack of compassion and love, and I feel like why I see them fall, If they raise their hands, ask me my help, definitely I will help them anyway. But if it's take a little distance, if they didn't ask me for help and I see them fall and I just feel bad, I feel like I should rush to them and lend my hand, but I don't know that is the right attitude. So I'm very confused at that point.
Yeah.
Let it be, whatever that moment I feel, right?
Whatever.
Thank you. That's a good question. Whatever. For sale, $1.
We were talking before about consciousness decision to play stupid, and is that one decision or is that 7 billion decisions?
It's it's one decision maker making 7 billion decisions.
Thank you.
One decider, yeah. remember Einstein, There are two things that are infinite. The universe and human stupidity, and I'm not certain about the universe. Talking about stupidity, I read an article this morning in the New York Times which was nice about beauty. It's not bad. And at the same time there was something which was kind of, there was this guy, homophobic guy, and he was telling another guy, I don't know if this guy was gay or straight, but it doesn't matter, telling this other guy, sex is only for procreation. That's scientific truth that shows that homosexuality is not rational, it's not natural. To which the other guy replied, so what is the science behind blowjobs then? It hit a scientific, how do you say, string in me. Well, it's a nice way. You have some explanation to add? To the science contribution to yeah, the mic is hot to take after that. After that one. Well, so that concludes our Thanksgiving retreats on a high note. Well, it was very sweet, beautiful. Thank you all. Thank you. Very sweet.